In the previous classes of the physiology, you have discussed the um, passive absorption mechanism. The how actually the mineral will be absorb and transport in the plant, that will be explained. That continue with the another one mechanism, that is a active absorption of the ions. So usually the active absorption, the key role will be the active mechanism, that is the energy is involved in this concept. The active transport of ion from the outer space of the cell to the inner space generally occur against the concentration gradient. So usually during the concentration gradient, the energy is required to transfer of the molecules. Here what actually the energy is obtained from the metabolic process of the cell, either directly or indirectly. With the help of this metabolic energy, the molecule is transported in the xylem or in the cells of the plant. There are mainly different theories to explain this mechanism. The one is carrier concept theory, another one is a cytochrome pump theory. So what exactly the carrier concept theory? Here the transportation by a molecule or the protein molecule that will help for the transport of the mineral and the nutrient. That means there will be a carrier in this mechanism. The next one is cytochrome pump theory. Here what happens, the transportation by the electrochemical gradient generated by the electron transport. Through this also there will be a cytochrome that will help for the absorption of the active absorption of the minerals in the plant. The first one, that's a carrier concept theory. This is how actually there will be a carrier. For example, if you look at this picture, so very easily so you can find it out, there will be a activated ions will be there, that act like a carrier molecule. When the molecule it will be bind and they will transfer across the membrane, and they go from outside, it will go into the inside, just like a carrier, and it to the energy, that's a ATP to ADP. In the presence of kinase enzyme, the carrier molecule will be go inside. Once this carrier will be get inside, they separate into carrier and the ion molecule. So this is how the carrier concept will be developed. According to this hypothesis, the carrier protein pick up an ion from outside of the membrane and discharge into the other side. The pickup and discharge of the ion requires the energy. That energy is obtained from the hydrolysis of ATP. The ATP changes into the ADP and energy is released, that is utilized to carry out the molecule. So after discharging of the ion, the carrier protein is represented to pick up another ion. The carrier protein may carry one ion inwards and may exchange it with the another ion at the inner surface of the membrane, so that the other ion is carried by the same carrier outwards. Here there will be a one molecule help for the inward, and the same molecule will help for the momenting of the ions in the outward membrane. That is how the carrier concept that will be explained with the simple mechanism. The another one, active absorption theory, that's a cytochrome pump theory. So here the cytochrome pump theory involved in the electron transport mechanism. So what you are looking in the picture, so that's how actually the electron will be carried from one side to the other side to the cell membrane. Here, what happens in the cytochrome pump theory, anion could be transported across the membrane by the cytochrome system. The energy is supplied directly oxidation of the respiration intermediate. The mechanism of ion transport is based on the electrochemical gradient generated by the electron transport. When hydrogen is removed from the substrate in the respiration and carried on along the electrons transport chain is discharged into the changed vesicles. So usually what happens, hydrogen, that's a H plus ion that move into the hydrogen ion plus an electron will be dissimulate. So usually the hydrogen plus ion and electron are separate on the opposite side of the mitochondrial membrane by the electron carrier enzyme, which are also arranged in the inner mitochondrial membrane, that they carry the hydrogen ion into the outside and electron to the inside. The hydrogen atom transported to the membrane must be delivered from the water by the simple reaction, that's usually H2O, that is releases OH minus and H plus ions. The whatever the H plus ions is there, that the electron is a carrier and they move the hydrogen ion. So here what happens, the OH ion of the water remain inside the membrane. So since the H plus ion on the outside and OH minus ions on the inside from the membrane, the outside of the membrane became positive charge and inside is the whatever the molecule is there, that will be have the negative charges, and this generate the pH gradients. Because of outside of the membrane, the one more acidic accumulation will be takes place. On the inner side of this membrane there will be a basic account of the OH minus molecule. Usually the mitochondrion H plus ions move outward, while the chloroplast membrane they move inwards along the electron transport system. The what happens here, the protein gradient as a proposed by the chemoosmotic mechanism, they must be generate the plasma membrane of the cell for the active transport of the solute. Here the electric potential different present in the plasma suggested that the charges separate across the this membrane also, and the electron carrier also required for the charges separation, but it is not yet known what substance in the plasma membrane act as a electron carrier. But the ATP has been found in this mechanism which may generate the protein gradient. Similarly, when anion moves actively exchanging of the OH ions, the cation move positive to the maintaining the charges balance. So like that H ion and the OH ion will be balancing. So this is how the electron transport will be takes place. The usually simply we can diagrammatically, that's A plus A minus, so like that will be explain the electron transfer. This is how actually Cl minus and the Br minus will be exchanging, or the chlorine and the potassium ions will be exchanging. The diagram itself is showing. So chlorine is a negative ion and K plus is the potassium is a positive ion, or the potassium ion exchange with the boron ion. So like that there will be the diffusion ion depend not only on the osmotic or the chemical potential gradient, but on the electrical potential also, because ions are particles which have the electric charges. Usually the chemical potential gradient is produced if the concentration of the anion on the outside of the membrane is higher than the other side. This is how the example explain the mechanism. The electric potential gradient may result from the presence of the charged particles, that's the ions, on both sides of the membrane, or by the charges associated with the surface of the membrane on the both sides. If the cation, that's a positive charge ions, is more concentrated inside the cell than the outside, but inside of the cell is negatively charged with respect to outside, the cation will be tend to diffuse out of the cell down the chemical potential gradient, but it will tend to diffuse into the cell down the electric potential gradient. The final direction of the movement of the solution will be determined by the gradient, that's a electrical molecules. So how that the solute molecules will be change, and the next step how actually the ion will be accumulate. The penetration of the ions of the mineral salt into the cell continues even if the concentration of the ions inside more than the external solution. So this is called as the accumulation. So it's the how actually the ion will be accumulated inside the cell. So once this will be accumulate the K plus ions and the Na plus ions, so usually what happens, the monovalent cations such as K plus are taken up more rapidly than the divalent, that's a Ca plus plus. So usually monovalent have the very fast absorbed than the bivalent molecule, so that will be selective uptake of the ion will be takes place. And other one considers antagonism. The presence of one ion in a solution reduces uptake of the another ion by the cell. This phenomena is known as the antagonism in a plant cell. So usually if you place it in a dilute solution, the potassium chloride will rapidly accumulate the potassium ion, which may reach the higher level that is toxic to the cell. If however the trace amount of the calcium are present in the solution, the absorption of the potassium is such a reduces and its poisonous effect to our poisonous effect will be avoided. The calcium is thus said to be antagonize the uptake of the potassium, so and it is called as the antagonized sodium mechanism. And so similarly the potassium, calcium and magnesium will be involved in this process. The antagonistic ion required very small quantity of the effects, and there will be disadvantages and the advantages in this field. For the instance, the many soils have the sulfur ions of the potassium, calcium, which may produce a toxic effect that will have the no antagonistic. Explain the certain ions in the soil solution may prevent the uptake of the other ions that are essential for the plant and hence may produce the deficiency of the particular ions that may cause the deficiency symptoms. The last concept is the factor affecting on the ion absorption. There are various factors that will be effect on the ion absorption. That's the external factor and the internal factor. The external factor may be a light, hydrogen ion concentration, that's the pH concentration, temperature, oxygen and interaction. Internal factor, that's the morphophysiological factors and the aging factor of the plant. So usually study in the next class about this antagonistic and other properties of the ion molecule. So in this class you have studied the how actually the passive absorption will be active absorption will be takes place in the plant, as a how the nutrient will be uptake and the salt accumulation and the antagonistic mechanism that we have studied in the these classes.